one of the most mechanically interesting parts of D&D is combat. So when it comes to combat, it can be very tricky to run because there are lots of mechanics. And what I like to do today is kind of go over some of my homebrew rules that I'd like to run in my games. Now, that being said, when you start messing with the combat, you start messing with a lot of rules, especially like min-maxers are going to be kind of upset if you start messing with the rules. Now, so when you modify rules and homebrew rules, you need to be careful to not do it without permission, or not do it without first including the rest of the party, your players, in that decision making. So having these common core rules that need to all agree on is very important. So before you try to implement any of these, make sure you're running them by your party and making sure that everyone's agreeance, at least there's a common agreement upon them, because some of these have implications on the game itself, right? So how you actually play the game in combat. Without anything better to do, let's get into the rules. All right, here we are on my D&D website, and I have a section on here that is dedicated to combat. So let's go ahead and go into it first. So the first thing I have covered is critical hits. Now you tell me which you prefer. I have two options here. There's the original, the rule 0, which is normal crits. When you roll 20, you roll the damage dice twice. So we don't like that as much because sometimes you end up rolling like double ones, which is not that much fun. So we end up doing one of these two rules. Option 1 is when you score a critical hit, roll the attack's damage. Then add that number to the maximum number you could have rolled on the original damage. Then add any relevant modifier. So this is called, like, I think it's called the Perkins rule, or Perkins crit. So if your damage die was 2d6, you roll 2d6 and then add 12. Option 2, when you score a critical hit, the attack deals maximum damage times 2. This is very powerful now. So boss monsters will have maximum HP instead of the average. It will take the maximum. Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the Perkins, where you're doing kind of the half and then you're rolling, or do you just get the max damage times 2? Because my party likes this particular roll, number 2, because it feels more powerful to them. And as such, I traded off. So when I'm doing that, I am maximizing the HP of the monsters. Now my party doesn't like slog of combat. They like combat to be over more quickly, so this helps them. I prefer option 1 because it feels more powerful than the original one, but it's not going so far as you're doubling everything. What do you say? What's your idea? Flanking. Now, flanking is a optional rule in the DMG, I think in the 2014 version of the Dungeon Master's Guide, and essentially it gives everyone pack tactics. If you're adjacent to another ally, you have advantage. It's very, very good for rogues. I prefer this. It's a little toned down than the advantage because straight pack tactics is a bit much, but we still like the mechanical moving around mobility of it, of moving around and getting flanking enemies. We like that mechanic. It makes combat more fluid. So I'm going to read my version of the flanking rule. When you and your allies surround an enemy in melee, you gain bonuses to hit. If you and one ally are opposite sides of a creature, you get +2 to your melee attack roll. If 2 or more allies are adjacent to the target, you get +4 to the attack. A flanked creature cannot flank others while it is flanked. And some creatures, especially large, multi-add, or otherworldly ones, may be immune to flanking as determined by the DM. So I prefer this one because it adds more chance to hit, but it doesn't increase the chance of critting. So it's beneficial, but it's not going to give like double the amount of crits, especially since we use that more powerful crit rule. And I think that's nice. I think it's nice and simple. 2 and 4, it's adding a little bit of math, but ultimately, I kind of like it. Now there's an other optional rule which I would kind of like, but if you are like for option 1, if you and one ally are opposite sides of a creature, you get 1d4 added to your attack roll. And then if you have 3 or more allies around it, you get 1d6 added. And I think that's a fun one, but it does add more dice rolling, so you may or may not like that. Some people like rolling more dice, and some people like rolling less dice. Another rule I like to use, and this came out of the idea, is when you roll the AC number, we didn't know, this was from early days, we didn't know if you hit or you miss when you hit a creature's AC. In order to kind of split the difference, we did glancing blow. When a creature takes an attack roll, if the result is equals their exact AC, the target takes half the damage rounded in the defender's favor. For example, when a rogue attacks a goblin with their short sword and rolls a 14 on the attack, and the goblin's AC is a 14, it's a match. Under the glancing blow rule, the rogue doesn't miss, but it doesn't land a full hit either. The rogue rolls 9 damage, and instead of taking all 9 damage, they take half the damage in the defender's favor, so that in this case they take 4 points of damage. This is a fun, especially when you're trying to move combat along, and it's kind of fun to have that thematic, oh, he glances you, and that glancing blow is a fun mechanic to thematically add drama to a scene. Now, have you ever rolled a natural 20 on a saving throw, and you're like, oh, it's a saving, I got a 20, but then nothing happens because you succeeded the save, right? Well, I like to add a little more flair to when you roll a natural 20 on a saving throw. And it depends on what type of save it is, right? So I kind of base these off of what is kind of makes sense for the ability. So each ability score has a unique effect when you roll a natural 20. So I'll go through those. Strength gives you opportune strike. You can immediately use your reaction to make a strength-based weapon attack or an unarmed strike. Dexterity gives you agile escape. You can move up to half your movement without provoking opportunity attacks. Very simple, very clean. Constitution, you get a healing surge. Roll 2 of your hit dice and regain hit points equal to the number rolled plus your Constitution modifier. And that might be a little too powerful, but you just rolled a natural 20. You can't control if you rolled a natural 20 or not. Intelligence, you get swift cognition. Until the end of your next turn, you gain proficiency in every skill and every saving throw. This is kind of fun because it just kind of adds to your resilience, but doesn't give you advantage, because you don't want to give advantage to saving throws with these, because you don't want it to have like this cascading effect of critical hits, right? Or critical saves. Wisdom gives sharpened senses. Attacks against you have a disadvantage until the end of your next turn. And then Charisma, Defiant Rally. Roll 1d6. Allies within 10 feet of you who failed the same save, add the d6 result to their roll, potentially changing the result. They're just kind of quirky little, you can't control them, they're not going to stack, whatnot, but it gives you some kind of benefit. Now, Surviving Death. Now, this is kind of a controversial one where you get certain effects after you make death saving throws. So this is a chart that you can roll on when you come back, and you can get certain effects. Now, these should be super punishing, but they should be noticeable. After you come up from making death saves, you roll a d12 and you apply the effect. Now, the effect lasts until you finish a long rest, or until someone makes a DC 13 medicine check. And the one reason why we wanted that, because we felt like medicine was not that useful, and we wanted medicine to be a little bit more useful in combat or within the game in general. Now, this is another common one, healing potions. There's 3 options when you have a healing potion. You can either use a bonus action, or you can administer the potion as an action to another person. If you use a bonus action, for example, you roll the dice. You have to roll the dice to get the healing, right? If you use an action, you get the full amount of the healing potion. You don't have to roll, you just get the maximum, right? And then we have the rule that if you use your action, you can administer the potion to an unconscious creature, rolling the dice. Now, poisons. Poisons is one of those things that I felt like is kind of underpowered, and it's kind of weird because dwarves can, yes, they have advantage, but the chance, like, there's potential for them to roll a 5 and a 6 on their saves, right? And then it affects them nonetheless, right? So I prefer this rule when it comes to poisons. When a creature is subject to a poison that they are unaware of, calculate the Constitution saving throw using their passive Constitution save. So it's a 10 plus their Constitution modifier. Now, if they have advantage, add 5 to that. On a successful save, they take half the damage and ignore the effects of the poison. So, like for instance, a dwarf who makes a save gets, let's say they have a 12 Constitution, so they get plus 1 to 10. So they get 11, but they have advantage because they're dwarves, so that you plus 5 to that. So they get a 16 they're passive. And if the save of the poison is higher than that, they take the full damage. But they're also resistant, remember. So any damage it deals is halved. So in the same case, if they succeed, they take half the damage. So in that case, the dwarf's case, they take a quarter of the damage. I just think on successful saves, you shouldn't just be able to shrug off poisons like it's nothing, because that's not, in my opinion, that's not really that realistic. Now in 3.5, I have a friend who he's very rooted in 3.5 rules, and apparently in that game, flying isn't just a free floating, you can make turns, it takes, like, you have to do a wide turn kind of thing. To add a little bit more realism to that, he wanted to add a little more rules to add more of that complications during flying. So these are my flying and combat rules. Unless a creature has the hover feature, when they fly, they must move at least 5 feet on their turn or they fall prone. So if their speed is reduced to 0, they fall. And I think they're flapping their wings. It makes sense. They have to be able to move or they fall. When a flying creature moves, opportunity attacks have disadvantage. So that's actually an advantage to the flyers. When a flying creature is hit by an attack that deals bludgeoning damage, the creature must succeed a saving throw, a strength saving throw, where the DC equals 10 or half the damage they take. So it's kind of like a concentration check. If it fails, the creature is knocked back a number of feet equal to the damage taken. So if you were to take 20 damage from an attack, the DC is then 10. If you roll less than 10 on your strength check, you move 20 feet away, or push 20 feet away. And those are my flying rules. Now, talking about forced movement, there's another rule that I like to implement. If a creature is pushed 10 or more feet, but that movement is interrupted and can't move the full movement, the pushed creature takes 1d6 damage for each 10 feet of movement they were unable to move. So if you were pushed 30 feet and there was a wall 10 feet away from you and you weren't able to move 20 of those push feet, you take 2d6 damage from the kind of the slam attack of that damage. So it's just kind of a lot of rules. When I have it multiple times where, like, well, I push them that way and knocking them into the wall doesn't technically actually do anything, but I want to add that kind of dynamics into the game, so that's kind of like default rule. It's kind of like falling onto the wall. Now I have in here some unarmed strike rules and grappling rules. I think those are just simply the 2024 rules. Now in here I do have some initiative rules. Initiative is kind of interesting because it's just simply telling the group when to go and how to go. So there's several different rules. I'm not going to make a full video on that right now, but feel free to take a look. There's 3 different methods. I have group rounds, a flexible coordination, and a dynamic initiative system using cards. Feel free to check it out. And lastly, I wanted to homebrew the surprise condition. I might do a whole video of different homebrewed conditions, which can be kind of fun. In the 2024 surprise rules, the condition is just you have disadvantage on initiative rolls. Now, I also want to add that you can't use reactions when you're surprised. I think that's very important that they didn't specify that they should have. All right, what do you think? These are my combat rules for D&D. What are your favorites? What are your homebrew rules that you use at your table that you love? And what are some homebrew rules here that you hated? And what are some homebrew rules that you've had, you've tried out that you actually hated? Because I'm just curious, because combat is one of those fun things. It's nice to see what other people are doing so that you can experiment yourself. So let me know and leave your homebrews in the comments below. Have a good one, guys. Bye.